Welcome, horror lovers. I'm Pete, and today we're going to embark on a journey through some of the darkness. If you're new here, subscribe and activate notifications so you don't miss any terrifying stories. In a secluded village, nestled at the foot of vast mountain ranges in a medieval kingdom, there was a story that sent chills down the spines of the villagers whenever it was mentioned. It was the legend of the Headless Knight, a dark and terrifying figure said to emerge on the darkest nights, riding his black steed through the forest, hunting those who dared venture into his domain. The origin of the legend. The story of the Headless Knight dates back to ancient times, when the village was young and prospering under the leadership of a noble knight named Sir Gideon. He was a man of great prestige, respected for his bravery in battle and loyalty to the king, but also feared for his cruelty. His name was spoken with reverence, but also with silent dread, for many believed that Sir Gideon had a heart devoid of mercy. At that time, the kingdoms were in the midst of intense conflict, and Sir Gideon's realm stood at the center of hostilities. He commanded an army of men who feared his orders more than the enemies before them. His ruthless tactics and the way he treated prisoners of war had earned him a reputation as both a hero to some and a monster to others. In a bloody war against a rival kingdom, Sir Gideon was severely wounded. During the final battle, where his forces emerged victorious, he was struck by a sharp sword that severed his head. It is said that, before he fell, Gideon cursed the gods, pleading for revenge, swearing that he would never rest until his honor was restored. The rise of the Headless Knight. After his death, strange occurrences began to plague the lands surrounding the village. Those who ventured into the forest or wandered the hills where Sir Gideon's body had fallen never returned. On the darkest nights, villagers began to hear the heavy sound of hooves echoing through the deserted roads. It was as if an invisible presence was stalking them. One night, a man named Eamon, a solitary traveler, arrived in the village. He had heard the stories of the Headless Knight and was determined to uncover the truth behind the legend. The villagers, terrified of what might happen, begged him to stay away from the forest. But Eamon, driven by curiosity and a thirst for adventure, ignored their warnings. As he ventured into the forest, Eamon felt an eerie chill in the air, as if he were being watched. The wind seemed to whisper words in an ancient tongue, and he felt a shiver run down his spine. Suddenly, a low sound of hooves echoed in the distance. Eamon turned, trying to locate the source of the sound, but saw nothing but darkness. The sound grew louder, closer, until he finally saw a figure of a knight, mounted on a black steed, riding toward him. The knight was imposing, but something was wrong. His armor, dark as the night, was rusted, and the horse seemed to have fiery eyes, glowing with a supernatural light. The knight was headless. Where his head should have been, only black smoke rose into the sky, twisting into strange, distorted shapes. His eyes, however, were vivid, staring at Eamon with an intensity so deep that the young man felt his blood freeze. The Headless Knight rode toward him, and Eamon, paralyzed with terror, could not move. But just before he could be reached, the knight vanished into the darkness, leaving only the sound of hooves echoing through the forest. Eamon, trembling, hurried back to the village, swearing never to return to that forest. The knight's curse. Over time, stories of the Headless Knight spread even further. More and more people, drawn by promises of riches or driven by curiosity, ventured into the forest, and more disappeared without a trace. The bravest among them, who returned to tell what they had seen, claimed that the knight was not just a simple ghost, but a tormented soul, doomed to wander forever seeking vengeance. The Headless Knight did not attack indiscriminately. His wrath seemed to be directed at those who had committed some form of injustice or cruelty. Just as Sir Gideon had been merciless to his enemies, the knight now pursued those who, in their lives, were responsible for tragedies, murders, and betrayals. Those who escaped his fury came back changed, filled with a deep fear and a sense that death still waited for them somewhere. The legend, however, was not merely one of vengeance. Some believed that the Headless Knight could be appeased, that the curse could be broken if someone found a way to honor his memory. Some suggested that the only way to bring peace to the knight was to return him to his grave, burying his body with the proper honors. But many who tried failed, for the shadow of the knight seemed to prevent anyone from approaching the place where he had died. The final encounter. The story took a new turn when a young knight named Alaric, a descendant of an ancient line of heroes, decided to face the Headless Knight. He had heard of the curse and believed he could put an end to the suffering of Sir Gideon's restless soul. Armed with his sword and a shining shield, Alaric set out alone into the forest, determined to find the knight's tomb and bring him peace. On the same night that Alaric disappeared into the forest, a fierce storm descended upon the village. Lightning tore through the sky, and the wind howled like a wild animal. The villagers, fearing that the young knight would become yet another victim of the shadow that haunted their land, prayed that his courage would not be in vain. The following morning, Alaric returned. He was pale, his eyes deeply tired, as though he had faced something beyond human comprehension. His sword was covered in rust, and his cloak was torn. He told the villagers what had happened. In the heart of the forest, Alaric had found Sir Gideon's tomb, but when he attempted to bury him with the proper rites, the Headless Knight had appeared before him, more menacing than ever. In the ensuing battle, Alaric realized that Gideon's soul was so tormented that his curse could never be lifted by ordinary means. What remained, he understood, was not revenge, but redemption. In a final act of pure kindness, Alaric knelt before the knight and, in a desperate attempt, offered him forgiveness. For the first time in centuries, the Headless Knight seemed to hesitate. The hooves of his steed stopped, and a gentle breeze passed through the forest. When Alaric raised his sword, the night dissipated into a mist of smoke, and, for the first time, the forest fell silent. From that day on, the legend of the Headless Knight was no longer heard. However, many say that on the darkest nights, one can still hear the sound of a horse galloping, still searching for redemption. For as the legend reveals, true peace is sometimes a path that is never fully completed. And so, the story endures as a warning to all. Even in the deepest shadows, there is always a chance to find the light. But the price may be too high for those who venture into the unknown. The phenomenon of Bigfoot, a mysterious and seemingly primitive creature, has been the subject of legends, testimonies, and investigations for centuries, especially in the more remote regions of North America. However, its origin is not limited to the American continent. Reports of similar beings to Bigfoot have emerged in various parts of the world, with descriptions varying, but a common thread that stands out: a large humanoid being covered in thick fur, with enormous footprints, and an association with mystery and the unknown. The name Bigfoot was popularized in the United States, but the legend itself dates back much further than the term's usage. The first documented appearance of such a creature goes back to the 19th century, when explorers and pioneers began reporting sightings of a large, hairy being in the forests and mountains of North America. However, the Bigfoot legend existed in an analogous form in indigenous cultures long before European colonization. In Native American tradition, the being is known by different names depending on the tribe. Indigenous peoples from the Pacific Northwest, such as the Salish, Chamush, and other tribes, speak of a creature called Sasquatch, which in some native languages means wild man. For them, Sasquatch was not just a mythical being, but a spiritual presence that represented the balance between humans and nature. In many indigenous cultures, Sasquatch was seen as a guardian of the forests and mountains, possessing mystical abilities that allowed it to disappear or move silently through dense woodlands. Over the centuries, the legend spread to other regions, particularly in Canada and the United States, where the image of Bigfoot became associated with mystery, always eluding human sight, but leaving behind evidence like enormous footprints, broken branches, and strange noises at night. The Bigfoot legend gained widespread notoriety in the 20th century, with a series of sightings and reports that captured public and media attention. One of the most famous reports occurred in 1958, when a California newspaper, the Humboldt Times, published a story about road workers finding huge footprints in a remote area. The story was based on an account by a man named Jerry Crew, who claimed to have found the tracks and, along with his colleagues, measured them. The footprints were about 30 centimeters, 12 inches long, and the workers began to speculate that a large human-like creature could be roaming the region. This incident was widely reported in the press and drew national attention, marking the beginning of what could be called the modern era of interest in Bigfoot. That same year, investigations by noted mystery researcher Ivan T. Sanderson began gaining prominence, along with other scientists who started looking into reports of sightings and footprints. However, many of these investigations proved inconclusive or controversial. Another famous case occurred in 1967, when Roger Patterson and Robert Gimlin filmed a humanoid figure walking in a remote area of California. The footage, known as the Patterson-Gimlin film, remains one of the most debated and analyzed pieces of Bigfoot evidence. In it, a creature of large proportions, with thick fur and an upright posture, can be seen walking calmly, unaware of the camera. Many believe this film to be one of the most authentic documents of Bigfoot, though others argue it may be a carefully staged hoax. Over the years, reports of sightings continued to grow, particularly in remote areas of North America, such as the forests of the Pacific Northwest, the Appalachian Mountains, and the wilds of Canada. Witnesses claim to have seen the creature up close or from a distance, in circumstances ranging from direct encounters to sightings of enormous footprints or strange sounds, such as screams or howls in the dead of night. These sightings are often described with detailed accounts, like the sound of trees breaking or a presence that seems to watch humans from afar. Many claim that Bigfoot possesses extraordinary strength, capable of breaking branches or even toppling entire trees, reinforcing the image of a creature of great size and physical prowess. Witnesses also mention a range of behaviors that suggest above-average intelligence, such as the creature's ability to disappear rapidly or even set traps to protect itself from perceived hunters. Witness testimonies about Bigfoot range from simple sightings to more intense encounters. A famous example comes from Cliff Barackman, one of the leading researchers of the phenomenon, who has spent decades collecting reports and evidence of sightings. Barackman recounts an expedition during which he heard noises and saw a large shadow moving among the trees, though he never succeeded in photographing the creature directly. He reports that despite attempts to approach it, Bigfoot seems extremely evasive, always disappearing before any conclusive evidence can be gathered. Another intriguing account comes from a hunter in the Washington Mountains. He claimed to have come across an immense creature during a hunting trip. The hunter, whose name remains anonymous, described the creature as standing over 8 feet tall, with reddish-brown fur and an upright posture. He stated that before he could fire his rifle, the creature let out a deep grunt and quickly retreated, leaving the hunter paralyzed by the strangeness of the encounter. Many witnesses report that Bigfoot's behavior is not overtly aggressive, but instead, it seems to be highly cautious, avoiding direct contact with humans. However, there are reports that in rare cases, the creature may become territorial and react violently when it feels threatened, as was the case with an alleged attack recorded in the 1970s in Northern California, where a group of researchers claimed to have been pursued by a creature after coming too close to its territory. Over the years, many pieces of evidence of supposed Bigfoot sightings have been collected, including footprints, videos, and even hair samples. However, much of this evidence has been controversial. For instance, the footprints are often questioned by experts who suggest that many of them could be of human origin or hoaxes. The Patterson-Gimlin footage, for example, is still hotly debated, with skeptics arguing that the creature could have been a person dressed in an elaborate suit. Moreover, the lack of definitive scientific proof, such as a body or identifiable biological remains, continues to be a major hurdle in confirming Bigfoot's existence in the scientific community. Many experts argue that if such a creature truly existed, it would be nearly impossible for it to remain hidden for so long, especially in an age of advanced surveillance and monitoring technologies. Still, the legend of Bigfoot persists, fueled by new reports of sightings and humanity's curiosity about the unknown. Whether as a cultural myth, a symbolic figure in indigenous traditions, or a real creature yet to be confirmed by science, Bigfoot remains one of the greatest mysteries in the history of cryptozoology. The legend of Bigfoot is more than just a story about a mythical creature. It is a reflection of our own curiosity and fears of the unknown. Behind the reports, the footprints, and the films lies a story that has passed through generations, from culture to culture, enriching our imagination and inviting us to question the limits of what we know about the natural world. Whether Bigfoot is real or merely a creation of our minds, it undoubtedly remains a symbol of mystery, always challenging reason and feeding the quest for answers. What did you think of this? Do you have any legend suggestions? Leave it in the comments. Thank you for watching.